Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make a rhubarb and ginger cake. This is a cake I actually made it about 7 years ago before I was doing videos, and it's a lovely soft cake which is flavoured with ground ginger. It has some rhubarb baked onto the top of it, and then a ginger syrup is made, and that's put on top of the rhubarb and allowed to soak into the top of the cake. So it's very, very good. It can be eaten just as a cake sliced, or it can be eaten as a dessert with some ice cream or something like that. So I start off by preheating my oven to 180 degrees Celsius, 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit, and I have greased a 9-inch 23 centimetre springform cake pan. I've actually lined mine as well. I like to do that, but I think if you grease it and flour it, that will be perfectly fine. So I go on to the ingredients, and for this I have 400 grams here of rhubarb. Now in my case this is frozen rhubarb which I have thawed out basically, and I've allowed it to drain, but you could use fresh rhubarb, and you want to cut it into about 1-inch slices if you can, and then you can cube it if the slices are too big. That would be fine. I have 300 grams of plain flour. That's 2 cups based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup. The original recipe called for self-raising flour, which I don't have, but I can turn the plain flour into self-raising flour by adding in baking powder. So here I have 16 grams, 4 teaspoons of baking powder, and that would get mixed into the flour. I have 75 grams, 5 tablespoons plus 1 teaspoon of soft unsalted butter. I have 2 medium eggs, that would be large in the USA. I have 250 grams, 1 1/4 cups of light brown sugar. I have 9 grams, 3 teaspoons of ground ginger. I have 285 millilitres, 1 cup plus 3 tablespoons of soured cream, though you could use creme fraiche or you could use natural yoghurt if you wanted to, that would be fine. Then I have 100 grams, half a cup of caster sugar, that's for the syrup, and I have 100 millilitres of water, which is a third of a cup plus 4 teaspoons of water, but I'm using the water which is drained out of my frozen rhubarb. That's just to give a little bit of extra flavour. And so what I'm going to do to before I mix the cake ingredients is to take 1 teaspoon of my ginger powder. If I didn't mention the ginger powder, I have 9 grams, which is 3 teaspoons of ginger powder. I'm going to take 1 teaspoon of it, or thereabouts, and I'm going to put that into my caster sugar because that will go into the syrup. So the first thing I need to do is to cream the butter and the brown sugar together. So I'm going to use my hand mixer to do this. So I'll put my brown sugar into the bowl and the butter, and then I'll just mix that until it's creamed together. And because there's not that much butter there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some of my sour cream, and I'm going to mix that until it's all nice and smooth. So that's nicely mixed. So I'm going to add in my 2 eggs and the remainder of my sour cream. And I'm going to mix those and get those fully combined. And that's easy enough. So I'm just going to set that to one side for a moment. And I'm going to put my remaining 2 teaspoons of ground ginger and my baking powder into my flour, and I'm going to give those a stir around with a whisk just to get those combined. And with that combined, just to make doubly sure, I'm going to sift that onto the top of my wet mixture. And that's good like that. So I'm simply going to gently fold that in until it's all mixed together. And with that reasonably well mixed through, I'm going to put that into my prepared cake tin. And then I'm going to level that off. I'll give it a shake first of all, because it should level off quite nicely by shaking it. And that's good enough like that. So then I'm going to place my rhubarb on the top, and you can do that making a pattern, or you can do it free form, however you wish to do it basically. And that's good enough like that basically. So I'm going to put that into the oven, and I'm going to bake it for an hour and a half. So I'm going to leave it for an hour baking, and then I'll check what it looks like, and if it seems to be browning or cooking too much on the top, I would cover it with aluminium foil for the last 30 minutes. But I'll bake it for an hour and a half, or until it's firm to the touch when I press down on it. And then I'll take it out of the oven and leave it to cool for 10 minutes in the cake pan. After 10 minutes I'll take it out of the cake pan and put it onto a wire rack to cool completely. And once it's cooled completely, I'll come back, we'll make the syrup, put the syrup on, and then we'll be ready to have a taste. I baked the rhubarb and ginger cake for an hour and 30 minutes, and I actually covered mine for the last 15 minutes. The cake rose up quite nicely, and it's baked well, and it was firm to the touch on the top. So I took it out and left it in the tin on a rack to cool for 10 minutes. Then I took the outer ring of the tin off, and the base as well, and I'll show it to you now. So as you can see, it's baked up quite nicely, and it's cooled down. So we can now make our syrup. And to make the syrup, I'm simply going to put into a saucepan my 100 millilitres of water, or in my case the juice from thawing out my frozen rhubarb, and I'm going to put in the teaspoon of ground ginger and the 100 grams of sugar. Then I'm going to put those on the heat and heat them until the sugar dissolves. So I'll put the heat on. And I'll just gently stir that to mix the ginger into the sugar and get it nicely dissolved. And then once it's dissolved, I'm going to bring it to the boil and boil it for about 5 minutes until it starts to thicken slightly and form a nice syrup. So my sugar has dissolved now, and the liquid is just beginning to boil. So I'm going to let that boil for 5 minutes, and I'm going to watch it because I want to be sure that it doesn't actually boil up and boil over. So that's my syrup boiled now for 5 minutes. So I'm going to put that onto the top of my cake. So the syrup is very hot, and I'm just going to spoon that over the top of the cake. And I'll use a brush if I need to make sure it gets spread fairly evenly, and it will soak into the cake and glaze the top, glaze the rhubarb basically. And if some runs down the side, that's perfectly fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that now for that syrup to be absorbed into the cake. And once it's absorbed, I'll come back and I'll cut it and we'll have a taste. So I left the cake for the syrup to absorb into the top of it, and it's done that. So I've cut a slice of it, as you can see, and it looks very, very good. I've put some of that squirty cream on the plate just to have it with the cake. So I'll have a taste of this piece. That cake is delicious, I have to say. Very well baked. Has a nice gingery taste, and then the tart fruitiness from the rhubarb. And that tartness is just offset a little bit by that syrup, the gingery syrup that I made and put on the top. So this is actually a simple cake to make. It doesn't take too long. And as I said originally, it was suggesting to use self-raising flour, and if I had that I would have used it, but I've demonstrated by making this with plain flour and baking powder that it works just as well like that. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well. And I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.